All right. How about the second part of this story about the Pope in the 1400s? This is part two of our discussion about the origin of racism. So, where we left off this story was Portuguese slave traders following the Crusaders around needed more slaves, but the rules were very clear that you could only collect slaves as the bounty of war. You couldn't declare a people just to be enslaved forever. And so the Pope was facing what we refer to as the Moses paradox. So this is Pope Nicholas V. Pope Nicholas V, remember his name. Pope Nicholas V uh, consults his papal geniuses there to figure out how can we get around this thing about enslaving people and not looking like the Pharaoh. How can we enslave people and not look like the Pharaoh? So the solution to that conundrum, the Moses paradox, occurred on June 18th, 1452. Mark that date. That's the day that racism was born. What the Pope decided is you can't enslave people, but you can enslave non people. You can enslave non people just like we enslave animals. And so, with a papal decree called the Dum Dravasis, on that date in 1452, the Pope declared the people of Africa in perpetual servitude, that they weren't fully human. They were soulless beasts of the field. And that act of dehumanizing those people, first in North Africa and then the entire continent of Africa, paved the way for a new type of slavery. Not the slavery where you capture people in war, but where you can declare a group of people to be less than human and therefore able to be slaved without being the Pharaoh. And we call this chattel slavery, chattel slavery. And chattel slavery that starts in the second half of the 1400s creates a open door for the slave traders. Now, since Africans have been declared as soulless beasts, we can treat them the way that we treat animals. And that opens up a brutality of 1400s, 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, nearly 5 centuries of the most brutal treatment human beings have ever levied against each other. Incredible murder, rape, kidnapping, turning tribes against each other. Just the brutality of the slave trade is beyond comprehension in our modern minds. It was meant to fuel the economic growth of the new market that was expanding into what we now call colonialism. But it was built on the backs of chattel slavery, enslaving people. Now, two important things. We're going to talk in our next video about the actual brutality of the slave trade. But one of the things that worked was dehumanizing people to gain control over them. If that worked with black Africans, who else could it work with? We can dehumanize women, bitches. We can dehumanize queer people. We can dehumanize the Irish. We can dehumanize any category that we want to subjugate. So the dehumanization of black slaves in Africa opened the door for all kinds of dehumanization that has fueled oppression for the last 6, 7 centuries. So we're going to talk about where that went, where Pope Nicholas's decree went in our next chapter of this discussion about racism. Hey, if you're liking these lessons, please share them, follow, and stop by the tip jar. It really helps. It really helps. Okay, welcome to the resistance.